Welcome to the Eureka Moments Only Podcast. This is your host, Christopher Decker. The Eureka Moments Only Podcast is where we share conversations and insights from top business and thought leaders in the world today, how these moments get shaped and the impact they create on industries. Today, we're speaking with Eric Clement, who leads the Strategic Investments Group at the New York City Economic Development Corporation, where he directs 3 affiliated entities that oversee the negotiation of tax incentives, taxable/tax-exempt debt insurance, new markets tax credit investments, in addition to a portfolio of debt and equity funds on behalf of the City of New York. These efforts help drive inclusive economic development by unlocking access to finance, mobilizing private capital, and supporting the growth of strategic sectors. Eric, welcome onto the show today.
Thank you. That was a mouthful, huh?
That's a lot. But could you simplify that for people? What, in essence, do you do?
Sure. So in short, I run the Impact Investing Group for on behalf of the Economic Development Corporation. The Economic Development Corporation is a quasi-government entity. We advise, the mayor and city hall on all things to do with economic development, obviously, real estate and finance. So I run one of the finance groups.
All right. So we spoke offline, and we could take this show in a variety of different directions, but we're going to stick with impact. But I want to give people an opportunity to hear a little bit more about your story, and you can start wherever you want.
Sure. I guess in short, I started off my career in investment banking. Learned a lot of the finance basics there. Was a lot of worked at a number of the major firms, so that was good. But what I found is that I really wanted to find out how companies operate, right? Because working in finance, something that I had recognized was that you can give me spreadsheets, all these things, and I can tell you what's wrong with the company. But if you said, how do you fix it? Like, I have no idea how to fix it. So from banking, I went to consulting. So was able to cut my teeth a little bit in consulting. So that was great. And then after 4 years in consulting, then I had gotten a really interesting opportunity to work overseas. Some partners of mine, friends of mine, had started a company, and I was lucky enough that they had asked me to run the finance department for them. They started an infrastructure development company that sought to build, roads, bridges, hard infrastructure in East Africa, of all places. I had always wanted to do, business overseas. At the same time, I'd gotten into business school overseas. So I was like, you know what? I'll take a flyer on it. Let's figure it out. Luckily, knock on wood, things worked out. But yeah, that was basically it. And then, from there, worked on a lot of really cool things, building infrastructure, worked on some private equity deals in emerging markets, and then ultimately came back to the U.S. Got married, wanted to build a life here. And, now I kind of basically do the same thing here in New York like I was doing overseas. It's kind of funny how life works out. You never expect it, but, it's cool.
It is funny how life works out, and sometimes we least expect it. And when I asked you to share some of your Eureka moments, your breakthrough moments, your aha moments, those moments when things kind of come together, you answered, yeah, those happened during my time working in Africa. So I was hoping you could elaborate on what were some of those moments of realization?
Sure. Before I answer that question, I think I just set a little baseline, right? Because, throughout my career, while I was working in finance and consulting or what have you, what always excited me was like the deal, right? Like, okay, let's get in there, let's negotiate, big numbers, like all these things. And, that was sort of like what always drove me, right? When we got to Africa, and this is like, to your point, the Eureka moment, what I had never thought of, what I'd never realized is that I could put, the finance skill set, the stuff that I love doing, to good use and do something that actually made me feel good, right? And it didn't hit me until we had completed our first deal in Uganda. And we had built a $10 million road, that was sponsored by the Uganda National Road Authority. And, we had been flying back and forth through the country a few times. And, folks know who we are because we don't look like anybody else that's over there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, after we had completed the road and they had the ribbon cutting, you just saw the increased economic activity, right? I mean, it literally went from people like going to market carrying things on their heads to motorbikes being driven on the street, right? Bicycles, cars, right? And just the increased economic activity, it just helped people, sort of feed their families more. And people would come up to us in the middle of the street, like after the ribbon cutting, and they were so happy, so appreciative. Thank you so much. Like, this is helping us so much. And I never correlated my skill set with this. And when that happened the first time, I was like, you know what, this is all right. Like, I like the way this feels, and I wanted to do more of it. So yeah, that was it. That was the moment.
I can imagine being in your shoes, just eyes lighting up, seeing the impact that had been created. And then now bringing that into your day-to-day work. I mean, you're doing that for New York City. Could you tell me a little bit about your day-to-day?
Sure. So, like you had mentioned in the beginning, I mean, basically what I tell people is that anything that has anything to do with money, the Strategic Investments Group pretty much runs, right? So whether that's tax incentive, bonds, money, whatever, tax credits. So we do a few things. On the one hand, one of the overall remits for the Economic Development Corporation is to promote economic prosperity throughout the socioeconomic classes, right? Doesn't matter if you're rich, poor, whatever. We want everybody to have the same opportunity to succeed, right? And we think as a city, it's incumbent upon us to make investments that can help further that, right? So within our group, we will invest in things like real estate, commercial real estate, industrial real estate. We've done things like finance Yankee Stadium and Citi Field. We finance Hudson Yards. We invest in education, right? We invest in alternative methods to education. So like cyber boot camps and, coding boot camps and things like that, right? We have VC vehicles where we're investing in startups. We focus those investments in, women and people of color because traditionally they've gotten a smaller piece of the pie than people that are not that, right? So all our investments are targeted to, promoting economic prosperity and equality throughout, socioeconomic classes. So yeah, I mean, we look at some really cool things. We invest in infrastructure. So yeah, we're literally touching everything. So it's interesting.
You're literally touching everything across all the different socioeconomic classes. And what is your vision for what New York can become?
It's an interesting question. I mean, look, my perspective, obviously I'm biased. I mean, I think New York City is the greatest city in the world, right? I mean, everybody wants to come here, right? And all honestly we're trying to do is just keep it going and try and make it incrementally better, right? At the end of the day, I mean, it's like you're running a relay race and someone just passed the baton. You just want to make sure you're moving forward, right? So, I mean, it's funny. I almost don't know how to answer that question because it's like 10 years ago, right? Silicon Valley was like where you needed to be for VC, right? And nobody was even thinking about New York. And now New York has a huge, tech community, right? Because we've made the investments there. We're still making those investments. Like I said, we're making investments in industrial making, I forgot to mention this, in movie studios, right? I mean, we're seeing a huge influx,
Wow.
yeah, like the Amazons, the Netflixes of the world, what have you. I mean, like there's a lot of content that is being produced, especially now during COVID times, right? Everybody's at home watching TV, I feel like. And at the end of the day, like all those investments, what's cool is that they end up creating more jobs throughout the 5 boroughs, right? So, when people talk to me and they say, okay, well, how are those investments that you're making helping me out, right?
Mhm.
It's not that we're investing in jobs only for like people that have PhDs. We're investing in those too, because we invest in like the life sciences industry or what have you. But even within the life sciences industry, I mean, we invest in jobs and in companies that you like, if you have a college degree you can get, like we're investing in supermarkets as well, high school degree, right? I mean, literally all over the place. So like what can New York be? Like I really want to see New York, become more equal. We're trying to do that, right?
Mhm.
And I really just, I would love, doesn't matter what you look like, what color you are, like what kind of education you have, like what country you come from, like you come here and like, for me, especially being an immigrant, like everybody's gotta have an equal shot. So as long as we can, help that out and move that along, I think that would be great.
Creating some equality and
Yeah.
unification. You mentioned content being consumed during COVID times, and that
Mm-hmm.
was um, largely how this Eureka Moments Only podcast really started to take off. Was once a year here at the Irvine campus in California. We host we have a huge conference, Eureka Fest, every year. 1,000 people are here, VCs, entrepreneurs, every major tech company is represented. And this year, that was no longer able to take place because of COVID. We had to cancel the event, postpone it until the following year. Hopefully, we can do it in 2021. However, expanding our footprint digitally has opened up a global audience where prior I would say it was maybe a little more localized. And even though we had several countries represented at the event, the majority of the attendees were coming from the Southern California area. Have you noticed any globalization trends in the workforce or in the work that you do and the investments that you make, embracing a larger audience?
Well, so I would say that for the most part, the stuff that we do at the Economic Development Corporation aims to be as inclusive as possible, right? I mean, look, New York City is a global city, right?
Mm-hmm.
So many of the things that we look at, both from an investment perspective and a programmatic perspective, have sort of that global sort of mindset.
Mm-hmm.
What I will say, though, is that, because of what's been going on, and given that at the beginning of sort of COVID, New York City was the epicenter of everything in the United States. I think
Right.
it has placed additional focus on the city, and what is the city doing to combat COVID-19, and knock on wood, I think we've been, not only New York City but New York State, we've been pretty successful in how we've been handling it thus far. I mean, we got hit pretty hard in the beginning. Everybody knows that, it's no secret, right? But I mean, when we look at the numbers today, especially as compared to what's going on in the rest of the country, I think we've done a really good job. So in that sense, it has placed a greater focus, because across the firm we're having a lot of conversations, not only nationally but internationally, about how we're handling things here in New York City, and what can other people sort of learn from what it is that we're doing, what we've been through.
So I noticed on one of your bracelets you have an anchor.
Yeah, yeah.
Any
That
significance
was
to the
pretty good. You
anchor?
could see that, huh?
Yeah. Do you sail? Do you like boats, or what's the anchor all about?
Yeah, no, I do like boats, but honestly, like I just thought it looked pretty cool, so I was like, hey, what, let me get it. But I do like boats. Don't have one, but I like to go on them.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah,
being here in Southern California, there's nothing like just getting out on the water and
yeah,
experiencing. Doesn't matter what kind of boat you're on, just being in the water is
yeah.
awesome. And thinking about an anchor when you're creating impact, it is an anchor in a society. That road that you helped build, that became a new anchor of commerce. People could rely and depend upon that. And it
I
really is
agree.
pretty special.
I agree. Yeah, no, I mean, that's literally like just sort of that anchor sort of, you know, analogy, metaphor, sort of like what we try to do here in the city too, right? I mean, when we make these investments we make, as part of most of what we do, we try to have carve outs, pretty significant carve outs for like job opportunities, internship opportunities, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you make an investment in life sciences, and at the same time, we say, I'm making this up, but we'll say something like, okay, on an annual basis, said company that we made the investment with has to provide 20 or 30 internships for people from underserved communities that don't even know anything about the life sciences. They probably didn't even know the life sciences existed, right? So that way they can be exposed to these sectors, because you're right, it does create that sort of anchor, and it starts to expand the opportunity, within various constituencies within the city. So yeah, we try to take the same approach there too.
Absolutely. And expanding upon, so random, right? But this is the perfect analogy for today's talk, is creating that economic anchor during a global storm. Being an anchor is also when you're at port, you're safe, you're home, you're secure. And especially with New York City having been that epicenter of tumult, there's got to be a lot of hope on the horizon, which leads me to the next question. I asked you, Eric, okay, if you had some advice to new entrepreneurs, you mentioned it's simple. Jump on the opportunities when they present themselves. You work so hard to get where you are. Don't get scared if it actually happens. How many times have we run into this in our lives when success is right here? It's right in front of us. Things are working, and then we back off.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's true, and funny enough, right? Even during COVID time, I mean, granted, there has been a lot of tumult, but there's also been a ton of opportunity. Like, I will tell you, we, the city, have partnered, as an example, with startups. So actually, before I even get into that,
Okay.
The backdrop to this, which again, everybody knows about because it was all over the news, right? New York City is getting hit hard. We have no ventilators. The federal government wasn't really helping us. Like, where are we supposed to get these things from? Price gouging, you name it. So ultimately, the governor and the mayor said, you know what, we're just going to start making stuff here, right? And, the Economic Development Corporation was right at the center of it, right? So what did we do, right? Out of nowhere, we start, formulating, and our group is in the middle of this. We start formulating joint ventures with different startups, different companies that have totally different skill sets. If it wasn't for COVID, they probably wouldn't be talking to each other, right? We structured these joint ventures, and next thing you know, like, you have a startup that is creating ventilators. You have, tech companies that understand how to translate the IP, to making the actual product. We've partnered them with, industrial and manufacturing companies that understand how to actually build the thing and make the thing. I mean, it's really interesting how these tough times can, end up being the catalyst to new opportunities that one would have never envisaged, So yeah, I mean, the opportunity was here, and, you got to grab it while it's there. Right. I know that there are a number of companies. I mean, some of my friends run them. Their businesses have actually been more successful during COVID than before. And yeah, I mean, they don't get a lot of sleep now, but they're not complaining. They're like, hey, you know what? Like, you gotta, like, it's here, you gotta take it. Right. So that's exactly where that came from. You just never know what life is going to throw at you. You work so hard to put yourself in a position to be ready, so don't get scared if it actually happens.
You've put yourself in a position to be ready. Don't get scared when it actually happens. There are so many examples of this. Yeah. And Eric and the Economic Development Corporation, they've been at the center of helping to facilitate these conversations and these collaborations. I've seen AI companies completely pivot their strategy to piggyback off Zoom conversations, and now they have 1 million users. I've seen restaurants that you can either choose to have one mindset. This is a real story. 2 restaurants on the other side of the road, of similar standing, similar value. One of them complained and said, "Oh my God, I can't believe that I can't have customers in here," and then that just continued to complain and did nothing about it. The other restaurant built a drive-through and 10x their revenue. So what are you going to do? What are you going to do? You've been working so hard to prepare for success. Don't shy away from it when it actually starts to happen. And then I asked you another question. If you had any advice to your future self, and I'm going to leave this one open-ended.
Jeez. I'm trying to remember what I had answered, or if I answered it. That's a tough one. What advice would I give to my future self? I mean, keep your head down and work hard, and, hopefully good things will happen. A problem that I used to have when I was younger is that I was always looking for the next thing, right? I'd work hard to get to a particular level. As soon as I got to that level, I was like, okay, what's next? I got to get to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
I never took the time to take a step back and say, okay, enjoy where you're at, work hard where you're at, like build your craft, like gain the knowledge so that way, you can be prepared for the next thing. I had to learn the hard way, for better or worse. That's how I've learned a lot of things in life. It's the hard way.
You sound like an overachiever.
But yeah, I would probably remind myself of the same thing, because, when you're in the middle of, just such a fast-paced environment, it's hard to remember to take a step back and say, okay, like, you just got to be grounded. Just put your head down and work hard, So, yeah.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that authenticity. I've spoken with people that have won gold medals, people that have, sold their company for hundreds of millions of dollars. And okay, are you happy? Do you feel fulfilled? No, because I need to go get the next medal. Oh no, I got to start company number 2. Well, if happiness is always a destination and that destination keeps changing, where does that leave you? You might as well enjoy the journey. Do you have any closing thoughts here, Eric? Anything that's sparked? Anything you'd like to leave our audience with today?
Come to New York City. No, I'm kidding, but not really. No, I mean, I hope people enjoyed the brief chat that we've had. I know I did. And yeah, just, I know we're in tough times right now. Keep working hard, like, we won't be in this forever. And, if you focus on the right things, for me, it was doing what makes you feel good, doing what you love. For me, if I focused on that, then I had to trust that everything else would work out. So I always keep that, sort of at the base of whatever it is that I think and feel. So I would just say to most people, try to keep that in mind. If you don't do what you like, you're never going to be happy.
Ladies and gentlemen, followers of the Eureka Moments Only podcast, you've been in the room with us this whole time, and we want to hear from you. If you have any feedback or questions that you'd like for me to pass along to Eric, and if he'd be so kind to answer them, I will forward them to his email. Today, we've been speaking with Eric Clement, who leads the Strategic Investments Group at the New York City Economic Development Corporation. These efforts help drive inclusive economic development by unlocking access to finance, mobilizing private capital, and supporting the growth of strategic sectors. Today, we spoke about creating anchors in storms of uncertainty and creating impact and everything in between. Eric, thank you so much for coming on the show today, and welcome to the Eureka family.
Hey, thank you for having me.